Okay, so welcome to the show. This is episode 3 of the Something Shitty This Way Comes subthread. And this time I'm covering the 1979 cinematic flick, whatever you want to call it, the Amityville Horror. Truth be told, this is the first time I've actually seen the Amityville Horror in its entirety. If I've seen it at all. Here's the deal with that. I walked into seeing or saying that I was going to put this on the something shitty subthread without actually seeing it, which is to say not actually having seen it before. I was going to screen it, but I sort of automatically knew that it was going to fit into that subthread. But then I went to pop it in today. I went to watch it. And I said, well, what if I like it? What if I end up liking it? It's always a possibility. In which case, I'm not going to put it into, I'm not going to force the round peg into the square hole for that sort of thing. I'm just going to play it out and see exactly what happens. Some of it looked vaguely familiar. And some time ago, I seem to recall, well, this was, I'm dating myself once again, back in the day when we had the big 3 networks. And so a movie would be released in the movies. This might have even been before the days of VHS or something like that. And then after about a year, it would show up on The Late Show for CBS or NBC or something along those lines. And I think I may have caught part of it there. I wasn't impressed. I watched it today in its entirety. And let me say, before I get started, I have nothing to say about the crimes that took place, the DeFeo murders. That's not what I'm talking about here today. I'm not here to talk about the validity of the claims that the Lutz family made. I mean, now, within the past 5 years, I think it's been brought on to even it's been, sort of a Venn diagram into the Conjuring universe with Ed and Lorraine Warren. So I have nothing to say about those claims. My discussion here is solely about this 1979 movie that was directed by Stuart Rosenberg, whose name really doesn't ring any particular bells. It was not an enjoyable 2 hours, and it's a full 2-hour movie, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's like an hour and 58. It talks in, there's a small part in the beginning, and I'm not going to go through the entirety of the movie because it was just, well, I'll tell you why in a second. It starts off with, you understanding, the audience understanding that you're witnessing the DeFeo murders, and then a month later, the Lutz family moves in. Everything seems hunky-dory. Nothing really to alarm you or anything like that. They're getting it for a steal because of all these crimes that have been committed. And then Rod Steiger is in it. This movie basically stars, so before I get ahead of myself, you've got James Brolin. I'm not a huge fan of James Brolin. I seem to remember seeing a movie with him a very long time ago, another horror movie called The Car, that I wasn't terribly impressed by. To this day, I still look at YouTube videos of that ending scene because you're supposed to see something in the fire that happens at the end of The Car. And to this day, I cannot see it. So I'm not sure what that's about. So I'm not the hugest James Brolin fan. I'm not, anti-James, but, not a fan necessarily. Margot Kidder. I remember Margot Kidder from the Richard Donner Superman series. I wasn't crazy about her as Lois Lane either. So you've got 2 people that, are not my favorite performers to begin with, but they're in there and they're the Lutz family. And hold on, we got some comments. And hey, it's Eric. What do you know? Oh, Eric loves him some Margot Kidder. Okay, man, we'll teach their own. She's not my thing. So Rod Steiger, he also is playing this priest who is the family priest, I guess, from Margot Kidder. He comes in to try to bless the home and is immediately attacked psychologically, physically with these flies. He's locked in a room. Supposedly there's, I guess he looks like he's perspiring heavily. It's just implied. I guess it's very hot. He doesn't seem to be trying to get out of the room. He just seems to be contorted into this position in the chair. Finally, after, the room fills with flies and he's covered with flies for some reason, he's not trying to break a window or anything. He hears this voice that simply tells him to get out. So that really sort of sets the stage for, I guess, getting the ball rolling. The problem with all of this is this. By the time I was 30 minutes into the movie, so that's 25% of the way in, I realized I had no interest in any of these characters. I wasn't interested in the Lutzes. I wasn't interested in the priest. There's very little introduction with the children. You don't really know all that much about them. I mean, maybe if you've read the book I remember the book in my day being this huge blockbuster. I seem to recall reading it. I recall reading it. So that was from a very long time ago. So I'm not 100% sure that, hold on a second. It's had a little tech snafu there. Okay. I don't seem to recall that it left that much of an impression with me. 30 minutes into this movie, and I'm just not interested. There's very little character development. It's a bad script. And I'm going to get into some other movies towards the end of this episode where I have, by comparison, within the same time frame, maybe perhaps limited budget and, limited practical effects, but just much more effective movies within the same genre, this haunted house genre. I think if this movie had not been based on the best-selling book, I think it was written by a guy named Jay Anson or something like that, it probably would be largely forgotten about. But because it is based on what is alleged to be a true story, although there are now these back and forth claims that, the Lutz family claims that they made it up, and maybe the priest even is saying now that, he made it up. I'm not sure what the truth is, but based on what I'm seeing in this movie, I believe if it wasn't based on that story, this movie would have gotten no recognition at all. John's here, John K. Alvarez. Scariest thing James Brolin did for his career was this movie. Second scariest thing, marrying Barbara Streisand. Yeah, man. I mean, this is a man of extremes. This James Brolin. I read the book. I liked it. Not Stephen King, but okay. It's very funny. I just showed some of the kids at work a true story the other day, and they didn't like it. But you show them anything fictitious, and truth is stranger. Well, yeah, okay. It's just there's very little character development. The script isn't that great. The performances aren't that great. The writing is very loose. It doesn't try to explain like who these people are. They're just the people that it's never really explained exactly what's going on in the house. And so, sometimes that can work, but then you have to have an effective performance to sell it. And in order to have a effective performance, you have to have you don't always have to have a good script to have a good performance. And we were talking about this last week with Dracula, with Stoker's Dracula. Ullman's performance is solid. It's just not a great story. Here you have a story that's not great and performances that are not great. There's a character that comes back and forth, and she's a nun. She's visiting. She's Margot Kidder's aunt, and she walks in, and there's a split second where she has this instant reaction to walking in the house. And I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. We might actually see a solid performance. Like maybe it was going to pick back up. And, I think at this point I'm somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes, and it kind of fell apart. But for a second there was acting where she was just, having this physical reaction to being a nun inside this supposedly haunted house. And for a second, it seemed like it was going to pick up, and then it fell apart again. James Brolin, for the most part, spends, I think by the fourth day, he stops speaking largely. So he doesn't have any in-depth dialogue. There's no real practical effects. He just spends his time making this vacant sort of expression. He's brooding. He's staring off into space. They seem to have substituted not washing his hair for acting. It's bad. It's bad. And please understand, when I do this something shitty subthread, what I'm doing is reaching for a movie that I feel is largely overrated. And this movie has spawned numerous sequels, and I don't understand it for the life of me. I was actually at one point going to, I swore that I was at the 60-minute mark. I said, okay, well, I'm about at the halfway mark. I can kind of make it. And I hit the display because I watched it on HBO Max. And I saw that I was only at 40 minutes. And I was so disinterested at this point that I literally considered just stopping it and giving the review, telling people that I threw up my hands at 40 minutes. But then, someone could always make the argument that, well, I'm making uninformed claims because you didn't finish the second half, so on and so forth. So I stuck it out. I think I had to pause a couple of times along the way. It never got any better. They were relying on a bad urban legend that was never really explained. Yeah, to this day, so it's been 1921 years, it's been over 40 years, and I don't think they've ever really explained or gotten to the bottom of what happened. It's never been proven one way or the other that these people, that they were lying. There just seems to be this back and forth claims of these vague things that were happening in this house that maybe were, trying to take over this new family that moved in a year after another family had been murdered. I think if I'm not mistaken, there was a priest there. What was it? Hal Holbrook? Hal Holbrook was in there. He's in there for like 5 minutes. He's like one of the bishops or the monsignors or one of the upper hierarchy of the church, because Rod Steiger is trying to ask for church support and he's just not getting it. And yeah, it's not a good movie, and it just keeps going on and nothing ever happens. That's just it. It seems like I'm being vague on specifics is because the movie is vague on specifics. Nothing ever happens. People just keep getting into worse moods. I think there's one scene where one of the kids smashes his finger in a window and they can't get the window up. This is what's supposed to be scary. It's not scary. There's this vague reference to this childhood or this child invisible friend named Jody, who might or might not be some sort of supernatural presence. And at one point, the biggest look you get, this is what's supposed to be the supernatural being. It's really bad. James Brolin, again, at this point, is just Margot Kidder. I can't say much about Margot Kidder's performance. I just watched it a few hours ago, and I really don't remember her that already. I've already sort of forgotten, and I really did say to myself, I'm going to give this a fair chance. It's been maybe 3 hours since I watched the movie, and I don't remember that much about what Margot Kidder did. James Brolin now is carrying around an axe everywhere. He's always chopping wood, and he's always cold, and he's always building a fire. At one point, probably at about the 75-minute mark, everybody is just yelling at everyone. And so that's one of the reasons you sort of care. It forces you to care because you just hope that they'll all stop yelling at each other. Margot's yelling, Brolin's yelling. Rod Steiger is just having like a complete breakdown, and they never explain how Rod Steiger's character, what becomes of him. Supposedly he goes blind, and then he becomes this sort of priest that they put away somewhere in some sort of rest facility or something like that. You never find out what happens to him. But the last scene where he has any lines, he's just screaming at the top of his lungs. And at this point, everybody is just yelling at everybody. And then, hold on a second. One day it just ends. I remember her doing those exercises. That's about it. Yeah, I saw that too. It just ghostly red eyes or a spirit flight to Albany. Yeah, I would have taken a flight to Albany. No, actually, I wouldn't take a flight to Albany. That would put me too close to this place. Do you have any thoughts on the remake with Ryan Reynolds in the James Brolin role? I'm not really inclined to watch it. I like Ryan Reynolds, but I'm not really. Yeah, I don't see it happening. Because I think it would probably just be more of the same for me, probably with some better special effects. But again, this is the type of movie, where you can make up for a lot with a better script. And maybe James Brolin and Margot Kidder could have done better with a better script. They're not good enough to do I don't think either of them are good enough performers to do a great job like Gary Oldman did in Dracula with a bad script. But this movie could have been a lot better. I honestly didn't take the time to look up who wrote the thing. It's just, yeah, I would have. I don't understand after 42 years how this is considered a horror classic. It's bad. It's bad. And then it just sort of ends. There's a scene down in the basement where one day James Brolin just snaps out of it, and they all run to the van, and they're running to the van, but then they're not running to the van because this demon is behind them, but James Brolin is just walking out of the house like he's getting ready to take the dog for a walk, and they realize that they've forgotten the dog, so it's a bad rainstorm, so they go back in the house. James Brolin goes back in, and there's a scene in the basement that really doesn't make any sense. I mean, there are so many things in this movie that just do not make any sense. And I always come back to that Stephen Langford conversation I had about a month ago, where he said, for Hitchcock, everything that he put into his scripts had a purpose. And we just came off of talking about From Dusk Till Dawn, which is just such a clever, lean script. And this is just awful. This is an awful script, bad performances, a story that goes nowhere, where nothing is ever explained. And I imagine it made a lot of money because people were dying. This was a big phenomenon in the 70s, if you were old enough to remember it. And I vaguely do. This was a huge thing. Hold on, John's here, and he says they were trying to cash in on the Exorcist Omen vibe of a few years prior. And I was just talking to Eric on Instagram a little bit ago. He was saying that, if I do this, then I've got to do the Omen. But my fifth or sixth episode was a compare and contrast of 1976's Richard Donner's The Omen compared to the remake, because I think that movie is terrible. I think The Omen is terrible. I don't think it's a scary movie, and I think it's clearly Exorcist hangover. This, at least, is based on what is supposed to be a true story, a supernatural true crime story. But this movie is actually worse, than Donner's Exorcist. If you haven't seen this movie, don't waste your time. It's 2 hours you will never get back, and you'll just have a big headache and you'll be angry. Fortunately, I was in a bad mood already by the time I watched this movie, so it didn't really ruin much. John says, I saw it in the movie theater. People were freaked. I wasn't, and I'm easily scared. If you saw this in the theater, yeah, I didn't see this in the theater, and I didn't see it in the drive-in either. I don't think it was. We went to see every movie up until the age of 13 in a drive-in. And then the first movie I saw in an indoor movie theater, because there was a drive-in about 2 miles down the street. And so that was our family Friday night outing. And my first movie that I saw in an indoor theater was The Empire Strikes Back. So I don't recall that this was one of it might have been, there there are things here, scenes that I vaguely recollect. Hold on. Best thing about was the popcorn. Yeah, I believe you. There's 16 films. See, this is exactly the point that I'm making. And this is why I have a subthread like this, because this is exactly the point that I'm making. This movie should have been stopped after the first one, because now good movies aren't being made. Because as much as we'd like to believe that there's an infinite amount of space out there for every conceivable movie, for every conceivable person, there isn't. And so all the original ideas and the original concepts are getting just squeezed out by this fat in the artery, with 15 sequels. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And it's not like the first one was any good. It's very bad. It's very bad. And that brings me to something else, and that's something I wanted to talk about in the beginning of this. It's the purpose of this show. An American Werewolf in New Jersey podcast is to bring what, in my opinion, is or are the best, or some of the best movies of the horror, the sci-fi, fantasy, and perhaps even the thriller genre. If these are the movies that I feel are what we should have. This is what you aim at. I believe in hierarchies. The hierarchies give you something to aim at. And so, when I review a movie, it's something that is, for me, worthwhile. So when we talk about From Dusk Till Dawn, yeah, that's worthwhile. When Eric and I get on tomorrow and talk about The Terminator, yeah, absolutely, that's worthwhile. The upcoming shows that I have and the ones that I've done before, those are worthwhile movies. And I've been lucky in that some of the people that have seen this program have not seen those movies. So I'm sort of proud of the fact that, I've been able to turn people on to some new movies that they probably haven't seen yet. By the same token, this something shitty, if something is, preferred, there's always something that is not for me. And so I'm pointing these movies out as well as things you could probably, save 2 hours of your life on. Now, if people like these movies, that's fine too. That's, what people enjoy is completely subjective. So if you enjoy, whatever you enjoy in terms of cinema and things like that, to each their own. I'm giving what I perceive to be my viewpoints on the best, and then probably things that you would be, well due to just kind of skip. But that's what I enjoy doing when it comes into this show. That's the kind of subject matter, that I want to cover on here. So I just want to make that clear. I think sometimes people can get, bent out of shape. Well, why is he criticizing this movie? Well, because I don't think it's very good. I don't think it's very good, and I'm trying to tell you this, whoever may be watching it, so that if you haven't seen it, you might want to rethink it. Or, hey, maybe I can look at it with a new pair of eyes and say, well, that could have been better. That maybe it's not, as good as I thought it was, but there are still lots of great movies out there that I can enjoy. And I'll be including those as well. Hold on a second. Oh, yeah, it is Thursday, Eric. It's Thursday. Wednesday, we're going to be working on In the Mouth of Madness. So again, we're working on the entire Carpenter Apocalypse trilogy. Thursday with Eric. These are the movies in the hierarchy that I want to shoot for. This kind of stuff, I think it's safe to say you can avoid it. You can avoid it. I'm sure they're very nice people, but it's not a great movie. Now, I don't want to talk about it that much more, really, but here's the point that I'm making when it comes to movies like this, because we're at about 25 minutes, and that's about enough for a flick like this. It's 40 years old, and it's not very good. When I make one of these something shitty episodes, something shitty this way comes. When I do that, one of the things that I say is that I'm going to offer another movie that I feel came out in the same time, maybe, hopefully within the same year or a year, something like that, that I feel is within the same genre, but is much more effective. And that's what I want to do here. So this movie came out in 1979, The Amityville Horror by Stuart Rosenberg. That same year, this movie came out. Salem's Lot, directed by Tobe Hooper, a television movie, not a big budget, okay? But is there any house scarier in horror than the Marston house? People forget that Salem's Lot is a large part of it is about a haunted house. That Marston house had a lot of horrible things happening in it. And this is a fantastic movie. If I take 1979's Amityville Horror and hold it up next to 1979 Salem's Lot, well, you know, the Amityville Horror just has to take a powder. You know, within the same year, you have two movies, and yeah, I'm going to say it right here. One of them is better than the other one, way better. I'll tell you what, I'll go you one further. Let's go up one more year. Here's another movie that's, I feel, a far superior haunted house movie. 1980s, The Changeling, with George C. Scott. And John's been on me to cover this for a while, and John, we're going to have to find a way to do it. I don't want people to spend money, and this isn't a movie that's available on any streaming services where you don't have to pay for it, but I would like to get into this. This is a fantastic and scary horror movie, perhaps even scarier than Salem's Lot. This is a fantastic movie, all within a year. Eric said, Tobe Hooper gave Salem's Lot a great creepy atmosphere. Yeah, when that kid was floating outside the window. Yeah, that is scary. Scary. Hey, man, I love it too. This is what I'm talking about when I say that one thing is better, so something else is worse. You know, I can't get into this. Well, you know, everything's just kind of equal. And, you know, if we're going to, I'll go you one better. This is from 1980, and this is a fantastic, maybe even the best haunted house movie. The Shining. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. James Brolin could have taken some lessons from Jack Nicholson on how to use an axe. You don't use an axe to chop wood. This is how you use an axe in a horror movie. This is probably the best of the three. Fantastic direction. Fantastic script. Fantastic performers. Three movies, all within a year of the Amityville Horror, and I'm going to say that every single one of them is better than the Amityville Horror, in my opinion. Now, some people may feel otherwise. You know, that's fine. That's cool. But for what we're doing here, something shitty, yeah. Prefer Dr. Sleep. I loved Dr. Sleep. I own it on Blu-ray. I've only seen it twice. I've seen it twice, and it absolutely blew me away. I was expecting nothing. And when I saw that scene where Red Room appears, the hair on I saw it in the theater in India. The hair on my arm stood up when I saw Red Room. Amazing film. Amazing. And John says, horror movies and comedy movies are very subjective. What some love, others cannot stand. Well, sure. And, you know, that's the point. But what I'm talking about is from my perspective, you know, what I prefer and what I think is better. So, yeah. Okay. You know, and I'm just speaking for myself. So, you know, that's what I'm saying. So 3 movies I've given this review that I think within a year came out that were better than Amityville Horror. Lord knows, 15 sequels. I have no idea what that's about. Hold on, we got one more comment here. Oh yeah, agreed. Yeah, that's kind of, I think, where we can close it out. We're at about 30 minutes. This is a 2-hour movie. I wouldn't bother with it. But, you know, to each their own. And if you enjoy it, then, you know, enjoy. Don't not enjoy it because, you know, what I'm saying is just one voice. Okay, I think that's a good place to bring it to a close. If you see this on the replay, please feel free to like the video. Please feel free to subscribe. Yeah, I guess that's about it. We'll be back on Wednesday with In the Mouth of Madness. Myself and Knight from the Night Watch Zone will be on there. And then on Thursday, we're going to be here, Eric and I, with The Terminator. So, yeah, that's my episode of Something Shitty This Way Comes. I'm not sure if we'll be doing one next week. We probably will be, but also bringing something from the Scary Summer series, because I'm looking forward to that now that it's starting to get warm out. Okay, everybody, take care and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.